Story 1. I notice the smartest people explain and speak to match their audience. They value the importance of clear communication, which means your objective is not to make people feel stupid or not comprehend. In contrast, people with specialized knowledge over a topic will use as many acronyms and niche-specific jargon with people that aren't familiar. This usually tells me that they aren't as smart as they appear to be, but like the feeling of acting smarter than others. Story 2. They are cruel. I've spent several decades in academia, and all the truly brilliant people I have ever known share in common that they are incredibly gentle with other people. Even the highly and obviously autistic and brilliant scholar I know is bright enough to stop and reconsider when he is being overly precise about something and to reapproach the situation. Story 3. If you ask them why they believe something, they do not have a good answer. People trying to sound smart will repeat smart-sounding things they heard somewhere else without really thinking too hard about it. Smart people will launch into a speech outlining the reasons and logic behind how they came to a certain conclusion. Story 4. Caring about intelligence quotient like it makes them special. Not acknowledging that smart people do dumb things constantly because they are human. Needing to be more right or more knowledgeable than anyone else in the room. Assuming they are brilliant and most people are intellectually inferior idiots who just cannot understand them. Story 5. The throw around words and terms that could be said more simply. For example, almost every time I see someone mention a logical fallacy, they are using it incorrectly and would have been more impactful explaining what they thought the logic gap was instead of just using a term. Story 6. When they describe their industry or expertise, they feel the need to use words like they're some kind of office astronaut. So, what do you do for a living? I work in the artificial intelligence space as part of the information technology space. That's nice. Do you have to wear a spacesuit for that? Story 7. When you disagree with them in an argument and they start bringing up their degree or some kind of academic achievement that is not relevant to the conversation. Story 8.1. They cannot conceptualize abstract concepts in the real world. They have trouble creating things on their own without assistance, like making a legible paper with few errors. They overestimate their abilities. Story 9. The way they talk about things. People who are subject matter experts speak confidently, but will say things like, well, in the instances we know of, this holds true. However, there might be scenarios where this doesn't hold true. We just haven't found them yet. People who think they're experts on everything will take a basic, and I mean basic, bit of knowledge they picked up, extrapolate from that, and be quite arrogant about it. Take literally any right-winger that took a basic economics class in high school or in the 1 year of community college they attended before dropping out. And it's not just taking a tiny bit of basic information, it's taking basic concepts, applying their own rigid way of thinking to it, and rejecting the way anyone else could see it, especially if the other person is a subject matter expert about that thing. Then they dismiss it afterward with, they don't know what they're talking about. Story 10. They attack your character, especially saying things like, how could you not know this? Isn't it obvious? Anything like that most likely just shows that they are either avoiding the question or giving themselves time to think of something or make something up. Story 11. When they start attacking your looks, it means they feel attacked. Feeling attacked often just means they don't know how to answer your question because they refuse to learn new things. Story 12. In my experience, anyone who calls themselves a freethinker is, in fact, the most dogmatic person in the room, no exceptions. This goes both for conspiracy theorists and people from the subreddit atheism types. If you've ever refused to search for something online because it didn't align with your beliefs, that's dogmatism no matter how you view it. Story 13. When they walk around telling everyone they are smart, the smartest people I've met never said anything about their intelligence. When talking to them, it was just self-evident. Story 14. Saying they are smart or they are smarter than you. Intelligent people would not bother explaining what others could easily observe if it were true, but an unintelligent person will try to sell you on their intelligence like a used car salesman selling you a lemon. Story 15. Anyone who claims to know everything or be smarter than everyone else immediately raises my suspicions. Smart people realize how much they do not know and work to outsource more to fill those gaps. The more you know, the more you learn you do not know that much. Story 16. Trying to present themselves as an expert of a complex topic, but misspelling simple words like their/your/too. Somehow I doubt that you have mastered quantum physics, but during your years of extensive study, you never learned that no one is not a word. Story 17. When you don't toe the line with their nonsense, or you challenge their falsehoods, and they proceed to slander you to anyone who will listen to them. An extremely toxic workplace behavior. Story 18. Contrary to showing off that they are smart, I think people who overly say that they are not smart to the point that it's unbearable secretly think that they are smart, but in reality they really aren't as smart as they think they are. Story 19. They mistake American politics for American football, especially when they clearly don't know their statistics or anything about the game. They just like bragging about their team winning and complaining about people who disrespect it. Story 20. Body language. I find that people who are smart are either introverted and observing, extroverted but actively observing at the same time, or not interested in anyone at all. An intelligent extrovert will always have moments of pure silence so they can observe you. It can be uncanny sometimes. Story 21. I had a friend who went to Berkeley, but he didn't understand what consent was. When it came to relationships, he was very immature and childish. That was eye-opening. Story 22. In this thread, a bunch of personality traits that may very well signal some sort of disability such as narcissism or bipolar disorder, but do not really have any bearing on intelligence. Story 23. I have come to see that people who believe they are smart tend to intersect with people who are unwilling to hear different opinions on their beliefs. Story 24. Saying intelligent things with complex words instead of communicating ideas. Intelligent people can explain the most complicated concepts to children, and they would understand. Story 25. They steer any conversation toward their own areas of expertise and dismiss anything others have to say without consideration. Trying to become an expert in areas that most people have little interest in, then pushing conversations on that. Practicing conversations on their own with cheat sheets. Quoting the Dunning-Kruger effect while also frequently displaying it. Quoting an intelligence quotient test taken as a child while blaming a broken arm in school and the teachers for not bringing work to them for not having gotten anywhere in life. Repeating a handful of conversations and not recognizing that other people are tired of hearing the same things. Remembering lists is one thing, but being oblivious to people's reactions displays a lack of intelligence. Yelling at the TV, whether it is game shows, sports news, or anything else. It's the definition of futile. Story 26. I struggle to measure intelligence in people. Does that make me dumb? This guy in school could never get past 30% in exams. I could pass them every time guessing. He put so much effort in and failed everything. I used to judge it. But when he hit life, he adapted, had a good job, house, family, everything. I also know people who are smart, but they can't navigate themselves and fail at everything they do. They just can't see when they are getting too cocky and end up in trouble. Some can't spell but are perfect at math. Some can't do math at all, but they can read others like a book. Some of us fail at every job but can read society accurately. Some just have too much trauma and can't put anything together even though they have high intelligence. There are some people, when disaster hits, a new person comes out that is completely high-functioning. It's so diverse that when we connect, it all comes together like clockwork. Your genes survived a massive time span during civilization and before it. Story 27. When they use what they think is a big word and immediately stop and ask me if I understand it. Sophomoric and stoic are the usual words used in my experience. My response is always, yes, I understand you, I graduated high school. Story 28. When they're desperate to show you how smart they are, people of superior intellect usually listen more than they speak and feel no need to convince random people of their prowess. But on the flip side, look out for the people who self-deprecate their intelligence. I mean, like the guy who refers to himself as the dumb guy in some way. Like the guy who sits in a work meeting and says stuff like, maybe I'm not smart enough to understand why we need to buy this. Could you explain the value in simpler terms? That guy is probably the smartest guy in the room, and everyone that matters knows it. That's the guy you need to sell whatever you're pitching. Learn to recognize that person when you see them, and your life will get easier. Story 29. When they run for president of the United States and sue their college from releasing their grades. Not naming names, but he is a bloated marshmallow Cheeto who shits himself on the hour. Story 30. Overuse of corporate speak. I work with a guy who is an absolute idiot, and I cannot begin to count the number of times I have heard him use the word synergy. Story 31. They diminish others and then lead a very depressing life and eventually die, possibly due to their mental health issues. Sorry, that describes my brother's situation. I am at no loss. He thought himself to have a high intelligence quotient, but he had nothing and never did. His only value wasn't what he thought. I'm probably smarter. Good riddance. Story 32. Continuing to argue with people on Reddit, you are not going to change anyone's mind. People generally do not come to hear the other side. They come here to get their opinion validated. Story 33. Lack of kindness. Such an obvious thing to do when you're just a little bit smart. You treat people with kindness, and you get either kindness or nothing back. It's a disarming way of getting your point across and your way with the least stress and the least trouble. Anyone rash and brash can be immediately spotted as someone who didn't think whatever they said through, because all you'll do is trigger the fight or flight response in people and either get fighting words or excuses back. I didn't say empathy on purpose, by the way. That's not the same thing to me, and it's a very emotional thing that I am not good at, and I'm guessing a lot of smart people aren't either. You can be kind to someone without having to identify, quantify, and respond to their emotional state. Story 34. Yeah, man, I'm a huge Tolkien fan. I rewatch the extended editions at least once a year. A lot of people love to sound smart by consuming geeky media without ever actually straying far from pandering mainstream franchise slop. Story 35. Smart people know they don't know everything and therefore realize they can be wrong if proven so. People who think they are smart think they know it all. Therefore, they could never possibly be wrong. Story 36. For me, it's the lack of intellectual curiosity. They don't care to know anything outside their often quite narrow field of knowledge. I know a few people like that, and everything not in their field gets labeled stupid, useless, who cares, and so on. Then they'll brag about their job and how important it is. Dude, you're a consultant. I think society as a whole will be okay without you. Story 37. Their default assumption is that other people are idiots. Case in point, JD. Vance's answer to the rising costs and shortage of childcare was basically suggesting that grandparents could watch the kids. Gee, JD, what a wildly obvious answer. You must be the first out of millions of people with this problem to suggest that, despite the fact that having family members look after your children for free isn't the obvious, convenient default solution that everyone tries. Maybe the fact that the problem isn't already solved is an indicator that for millions of families, that's not an option for various reasons. Story 38. They talk about how much money they have. Having a lot of money is more luck than intelligence. People who are intelligent don't care about money, other than having enough to survive. Story 39. I have a friend who is very educated and is probably very smart in some respects, but gave me a copy of Jordan Peterson's 12 Rules for Life. After reading through it, he wanted to discuss it with me, and I had to break it to him that other than the basic principles it presented, it was full of logical fallacies, unproven conclusions, and barely subtle regressive Christian heteronormative ideas. It's really hard to think well of someone who thinks so highly of themselves but can't pick up on such shallow hate and manipulation. At least I hope it was a lack of reasoning, and not that they just couldn't admit that they are a closet homophobe, misogynist, or racist. Looks like I'm the fool now. Story 40. When in an argument they use phrases like, "You're just proving my point," instead of illustrating why you're incorrect. It's often because they have no real rebuttal. Story 41. They think they know everything. I consider myself sharper than the average knife, and I know just enough to see the vast scope of my own ignorance. The people that claim to know everything usually understand nothing, particularly in politics, economics, and religion. Essentially, the Dunning-Kruger effect. This is the underlying beauty of mathematics and hard sciences in my eyes. With just a few axioms, things can be right, wrong, or unknown, and it's pretty hard to lie about what you don't understand. Story 42. Somebody who has a huge vocabulary and uses it every chance they get, at the expense of communication. I've met people like that, and they just don't understand that even though you can, sometimes you shouldn't. Story 43. When people make stupid comparisons. I've seen Emily Wilson say something about how Democrats always mention that Donald Trump is a felon, but then were upset when George Floyd died. It's so stupid that it's hard to even explain to someone like that there's a difference between not deserving to be a victim of racism and police brutality and deserving to become president. Some people pull comparisons out of nowhere and run with it, and it's just impossible to get through to them.